Welcome to another inspiring episode of Born to Speak to You TV. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and today we have a conversation that I am sure will challenge the way you think about risk, being courageous, and having purpose. Some people talk about life, living life to the fullest, but our guest today, he has done that, and he has done a lot more. John Graham, life is one of the most extraordinary, risk taking, extraordinary, dangerous, and adventurous lives that I've come across in a long time. He's been on the front line of wars and some of the most dangerous mountains as well. So sit back, relax, because this is Born to Speak to You TV. We'll be right back. And we are back. This is Born to Speak to You TV, and I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. This episode is one of my favorites. This one is called Courage in Service, Dare to Make a Difference. My host, my guest today is going to knock your socks off. I told you a little bit about him when we first came on, but let me give you a little bit more into his background. Of course, his name is John Graham, and he's climbed some of the world's most dangerous mountains. He's been on the front line of wars and revolutions as a U.S. Foreign Service officer. He put his life on the line at some of the most volatile corners of the globe. And through it all, he's been searching for something deeper, meaning. But John's life doesn't just stop at adventure. For the past 4 decades, he has dedicated his life to leading the Giraffe's Heroes Project. The Giraffe Heroes Project is a global movement that inspires ordinary people like you and me to do extraordinary things by sticking their necks out. I could go on and on about John's achievements, but I think it's better to bring him in and let him tell it himself. Please welcome to the show, John Graham.
Hey, Calvin.
John, welcome to Born to Speak to You. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thanks very much. It's finally raining out here after a dry summer in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay. It's doing the same thing on the East Coast, I hear. So I guess here in the middle of the country, we're nice and dry and enjoying the last remnants of summer. But John, I want to get into your story. Your story has motivated me. Several months ago when I looked you up and did some research on you, I was like, wow, this guy calls himself the bad butt granddad. And I was like, that first attracted me to you. And I said, okay, let me delve a little further. And I found out about the Giraffe Heroes Project. And I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more about the Giraffe Heroes Project. I know it's a global movement, but tell us in your words what it is.
Sure. And by the way, it's badass granddad, Calvin. Badass.
Mm-hmm.
They're 3-minute videos I do, a couple every week, and they're on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. And there's stories of my adventures, but there's some life lessons in there too that I know you'd appreciate about courage, service, stuff like that. Anyway, that brings us to your question, which is the Giraffe Heroes Project. It started, and by the way, I got to be real clear about this. I wasn't smart enough to start it. It was started by a woman who's been my wife now for 43 years. Her name is Ann Medlock. She was a writer and editor in New York City, and she was kind of fed up with all the negative news. You know, everything was gloom and doom. And she knew there were good people, brave people out there doing important things, brave things, solving problems, not just in New York City, but around the planet. But nobody was talking about them. She figured that she would start. So she started her own network from her living room. She called it the Giraffe Heroes Project. Real simple strategy. And she'd find people who were already sticking their necks out, that is to say, taking a risk. Could be financial risk, could be physical risk, could be emotional risk, could be risk of being fired, ostracized, whatever, risk. But they were taking risks to make life better. And she would then tell their stories. Back in those years, now we're talking early 1980s, Calvin, so no social media. She would get a movie or a stage star she would get hold of on Broadway, and she'd get them to do a voiceover. So she'd end up with a 3-minute a 3 to 4 minute radio thing or phonograph, whatever. Anyway, he put them on vinyl disc. Now, I don't know how old your audience is, but a vinyl disc is a black thing that goes round and round on a turntable. Music comes out.
Yeah, right.
And so she'd create these vinyl discs of these short 3-minute stories of heroes, send them out to radio stations all around the country. At first, nobody listened, but then they started to. And they began to realize that these were really important stories. Shouldn't have been surprised, Calvin, because as you know, as a professional actor and media person, the most important way any culture has used to motivate its own people is not through preaching at them, it's through telling stories. And that's what Ann does. She was a storyteller. I mean, it's like what Neanderthals dancing around their campfires. They wanted to change their culture, get people to do brave things. They tell them stories. Same thing with the troubadours in the Middle Ages, for example. Well, anyway, Ann Medlock became the troubadour for our ages. And in a few years, from nothing, she had a network going and a nice story in the New York Times that really set her going. About that time, a little bit before, I had met her because I was still a diplomat at the United Nations. And I was getting really fed up with the fact that it was so hard using official organizations to make life better. There was always something in the way. And so I quit because the U.S. government was never going to move fast enough on the peace and justice issues that by then concerned me. And there's a whole story behind that. We can talk about that in a minute. But anyway, I was really impassioned about making the world a better place, and it wasn't going to be at the United Nations. So I'm looking around kind of lost, and a friend of mine says, "Hey, you're running out of money, right, John?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm running out of money." And the friend says, "Well, look, you can make a lot of money on cruise ships." I said, "Well, what? You're kidding?" He says, "Yeah, you always had a good gift of gab. You know, you get on a cruise ship, give us some silly lecture on foreign policy or something. They pay you a huge amount of money. You get to take someone with you. It's a real sweet deal." So I applied and I scored on my first effort, and I found myself on a cruise ship in 1980. I took my daughter. Yeah.
Before we get into the cruise ship, I want to go back to the Giraffe Heroes project. What makes them heroes? I know that they don't wear a cape or have any superpowers. They can't stop a locomotive or go faster than a speeding bullet. But what makes them a hero?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was getting ahead of my story a little bit there. Anyway, Ann Medlock starts this. I joined her about 1982, 83. And we both become troubadours. We both become storytellers. And we start interviewing people, and we ask them the questions that you're asking. Well, why do you do this? What are you doing? And we find out that the risks, first of all, the people that we honored are everybody. I mean, they're obviously every color in the rainbow. They're every walk of life. They're in 60, 70 different countries. They're just people, just ordinary people who see a problem around them. And they decide, hell, no one else is solving that problem. I got to get off the couch here and solve it myself or start solving it. And what will those problems be? Well, for kids, for example, a lot of the problems that kids have to deal with is like things like bullying, for example, or social peer pressures for not conforming. So any kid that's busting the traces and trying to get other kids, for example, to get involved in an environmental project in their town, picking up trash on the public beach, for example. 10-year-olds can do that. 8-year-olds can do that. Of course, as you get older, the risks get more serious. Sometimes the risk is physical, and some giraffes have actually been injured and killed for doing what they're doing.
Right.
They tick off so many people that they invite some serious enemies. Some of the risks are of being fired. Whistleblowers, for example, Calvin. A lot of our giraffe heroes are whistleblowers. And I think your audience knows what a whistleblower is. They work for a company or the government, and they see some corrupt or stupid practice, and they say, hey, that's not right. And then their bosses say, will you please shut up? And they don't shut up. So they get fired. They lose their livelihood, whatever. That's a real risk. Often, if you're maybe of a different political slant from the people in your neighborhood, you get your neighbors mad at you. They won't invite you to their parties or whatever because you're just the wrong whatever. You're not a Republican, or you're not a Democrat, or you're not this, or you're not that. So there's social pressures, community pressures. It's all outlined on our website, giraffe.org. There's a whole couple of pages on what we're looking for, but that's the sum of it. These
Okay.
kinds of and it has to be significant. It can't just be a risk that you take on one Saturday afternoon. It's got to be for a repeated pattern in your life.
Would you
and
would you say
yeah.
Yeah, would you say it's a risk that makes a change?
Oh, absolutely. The whole idea is that it has to be aimed. It doesn't have to always succeed, because giraffe heroes don't always succeed. But it has to be something that helps solve a significant public problem. Now, that's the two words are significant and public. It has to be a serious problem, not something that really worries people. And it has to be a public problem. In other words, getting your kids' homework done is not a public problem. It's a private family problem. A public problem is a problem that the homeless, there's not enough housing for the homeless in your town. A public problem could be maybe something you see in, I'll be blunt, some of the current stuff the current administration is doing is a public problem for lots of people. So it's got to be a public problem, and it's got to be significant.
Okay.
I mean, the risk it has to be a real risk.
Okay. Something like maybe getting clean water into a place that historically may not have the best water, or maybe something like that. Maybe it's a food desert, finding a way to get people fed. Something like that,
absolutely.
perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, we have a bunch of stories from communities, often communities of color, who have no place else to live but next to some company spewing toxic waste into the environment, and their kids are dying and getting sick, and so one or two or a bunch of them stand up and raise hell and try to get the state government or the federal government to get the polluters to clean up for public health. I know one of the stories I remember best was a young woman in Flint, Michigan. I don't know.
Right.
10 years, but 10 years, Calvin? I don't know.
At
Lead pipes,
least.
yeah. And again, it was a lot of poor communities that were suffering from these lead pipes because no one had bothered to replace them. And so people were getting sick from lead poisoning. And this woman blew the whistle. And the city said, the city of Flint originally says, oh, it's not a problem, not a problem. What are you're just making people angry and upset. Well, she kept at it. She went to the press. She filed lawsuits. And she was the woman that really got energy going for the massive cleanup and replacement of lead pipes in Flint, Michigan. So those are just a couple stories. And we've now added 2,000 people. So we've got 2,000 stories like that.
Wow. I mean, and that's probably on the low end, because there's a lot of people, I would imagine, that's out there doing good works, making changes, and people just don't know who they are. They stay under the radar. You know, they maybe have their own network. They get things done, and they move on to the next project.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how many of these heroes really don't really care whether their story is told or not, and we have to convince them to do that, because we're saying, look, we're not trying to make your ego fat because you're doing this wonderful thing. We want you as a role model, and that's the whole idea of the troubadours or storytelling. You become a role model. You get off your butt, off your couch, and you say, I'm going to fix this problem. I'm going to start something that finally delivers clean water in this community, or I'm going to one that's a rural health clinic put into my rural farming community out here, or I'm the one that's going to blow the whistle on my own company for cheating on their taxes or whatever. And then they get up and do something. And that's what we're looking for. And like I say, there's 2,000 people. You can reach most of their stories at giraffe.org. It's free.
Okay. All right. Sounds great. I would imagine a lot of folks have reason to remain anonymous for personal safety, maybe their family safety, things like that, right?
Yeah, that's true. And we have to be careful with that. And in some cases, we just haven't told the story because the danger is so extreme. But in most of the cases, Calvin, we find just the opposite, that by making someone famous or semi-famous, we provide them with a little bit of an insurance policy. Because after all, once that woman in Flint, Michigan became famous, thanks not just to us, but to other media, it was really hard for anyone to do her harm because she was famous. And had someone, hit her or something or worse, there would have been a huge outcry. So sometimes our stories provide real physical protection for giraffes, because when you're absolutely no one's heard about you, it's much easier for some big shot to squash you. But when you're known, much harder for a big shot or anyone to do that.
Sounds good. Makes sense, John. Makes sense. Well, we're going to take a little break right here. And when we come back, we're going to have more of the conversation with my guest, John Graham. This is Born to Speak to You TV. We'll be right back in 60 seconds. This is Calvin Gibbs, and this is the segment we like to call Born to Rise. I'd rather have an enemy who admits they hate me instead of a friend who secretly puts me down. Yes, I would rather have somebody that says, Calvin, I do not like you, because I know where that person's coming from. They're being honest. They're being truthful. I know which category to put them in. But when you have a friend who secretly puts you down behind your back, say they got your back when they're talking to you, facing you, and then secretly behind your back, they're talking about you, they're laughing at you, they're hoping you don't be successful. Now, give me the enemy. Give me the enemy any day that admits that they hate my guts instead of a friend, or what I perceive to be a friend, who secretly puts me down. That's your tip for today. This is Born to Rise, and I'm Calvin Gibbs. This is Born to Speak to You TV.
From the streets of Brooklyn, where stories grow wild, to the glow of the stage where the dream meets the child. A quiet flame, a hidden spark, drawn to the words that lit up the dark.
And we are back. This is Born to Speak to You TV. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and today my guest is John Graham. And we've been having a great conversation about the Giraffe Heroes Project. John told us what it's all about, how they determine who can be a hero, a giraffe, if you will. But, John, I have some questions for you about your life. Okay? I know by reading your bio, maybe a little of your memoir, you faced life and death situations around the globe. What did those experiences teach you about the true meaning of courage?
Well, I gotta say, I want to make sure your audience knows that I didn't start out being someone devoted to public service and public good. I was just the opposite. Now, I'm lucky to be alive too. I mean, the kind of stuff I was doing, I just walked away from one difficult situation after the other. It all started very briefly when I was just 17 years old. I shipped out on a freighter going to the Far East. In those years, and I was, we're talking late 1950s. There were no container ships. It was just a big cargo ship, and with 50 or 60 really tough guys on it, guys with muscles and tattoos. And these guys took one look at me, 17 years old, and they were determined that they were going to teach me life lessons that I was never going to learn in school. And boy, were they were right. And I know this is a family station, so I'm not going to tell you in any detail what those lessons were, but you can imagine.
Hey, John, let's just say they looked at you and said, dinner.
Yes, except that there was a start of a real lesson there, really important lesson about role models, which is part of my answer to your question, necessity for role models. First night on deck, I'm milling around with some of the crew, and one of the crew starts making unwelcome sexual advances on me, and another guy, but he must have weighed 250 guys for 250 pounds. He's a great big black guy from the engine room, and he grabs this other guy, shoves him up against the bulkhead, beats the shit out of him, and then lets loose a stream of cussing that was just magnificent. Oh, it was something. I sat there with my mouth open because I'd grown up in Tacoma, Washington, which is like a really quiet community. And I love my dad, but my dad wasn't a tough guy at all. He was constantly bullied. And at school, I was constantly bullied. So I was desperate for some kind of model that could teach me what it was to be a man or what it was to live. I was desperate. So here's this guy. His name was Roy. He beats the shit out of this guy, saves me. When I'm looking at that, I go back down to my cabin and I practice in front of a mirror, shoving someone up against the mirror and beating them up, and I practice trying to cuss like Roy was cussing. Oh man, I wanted to be like Roy. 2 years later, I was hitchhiking in Europe, and there was a war going on in Algeria. The rebels were trying to get control of Algeria from the French colonials in that era. And hell, I'd never been in a war, Calvin, so that was a real risk. And I thought, I got to do that. So I hitchhiked down through Spain and Morocco, and I walked across the border into Algeria. And there was no border guards because, like I say, there was a war going on. Smart thing I did, though, was I had an American flag, and I stuck it to my shirt so that the rebels would see that and they wouldn't take me for a Frenchman and shoot me. I shouldn't have worried. The rebels were really helpful, and they would even point guns at drivers and tell them to take me wherever I wanted to go. So I was right in the middle. I hitchhiked right through the middle of the Algerian Revolution. And then more and more adventures followed that. The next year, I was with a team that made the first descent of the most dangerous peak in North America, Denali, Mount McKinley. No one's ever done it since because it's so friggin' dangerous. And I kept looking also for other role models, and they were people like John Wayne and, that kind of stuff. And it was all about physical violence. You're going to say
John,
something.
when you're young and you're out there, you're seeing the world, you're coming across situations that you never even imagined you would be in, or even that they existed. You must have had some fear in your journey. How did you learn to move past your fear rather than be stopped by it?
Well, first of all, I rode crew in college, so I developed a body, 6.5 foot body that was pretty fearsome. So it was very few people would mess with me. And so that was an important part of it. But the other part was I kept walking away unscathed from all these adventures. And after 8, 10 times, I began to think of myself as indestructible. So that really diminished the fear factor. I could walk into anything and walk out of it again. And also I was just consumed by adventures, most of them violent, either climbing mountains or getting shot at. I was in the war in Vietnam for 1.5 years, for example. And it all led me to believe that I was indestructible, but it also led me to believe that there was nothing more important than the next adrenaline rush. Adrenaline became my drug of choice, Calvin. It became my drug of choice. And I didn't give a damn about other people. I didn't give a damn about public problems. All I wanted was the next adventure that I could tell stories about and come home. And, that's all that mattered to me. And that was true up until I was about 38, 39, I guess. And I was in a horrible battle in Vietnam. And in the height of that battle, I realized that I hated the war. It was stupid. It was unwinnable. I knew that. I volunteered to go to Vietnam. Everybody else went the other direction, but I wanted to be in a real shooting war because at that point in my life, I was so crazed with the need for adrenaline. I would do damn near anything for that rush. So I decided to go to Vietnam, and I asked the State Department, for whom I then worked, to give me the most dangerous assignment they had. And they did. They put me in a city just 50 miles short of the then demarcation line between North and South. And I was there when the North Vietnamese attacked in 1972, so-called Easter Offensive. And I barely escaped with my life. But at the height of this battle, I realized, like I say, I didn't care about the war. I didn't even care who won. All I cared about was my own adventure. And then suddenly I realized, God damn it, I live 8,000 miles from here. I don't care about the war. And yet I'm a senior person over here. So people are living and dying because of decisions I'm making. And all of a sudden, the sheer shallowness of my life became so apparent. And it just hit me right in the middle of that battle. I think I even wept. I mean, it's like, Jesus, what am I doing with my life? I survived. I survived because the weather cleared and American fighter jets off carriers off the coast obliterated the North Vietnamese, who were then within 6 miles of where I was in Hue City. And I got out of there again alive, but this time I came back with more than just what we would now call PTSD, Calvin. I came back utterly shattered because I realized how empty my life had become. And here we get to the answers to your question. I had to do something about that. I had to do something. I had to find some meaning. What made my life mean? Up to that point, Calvin, I thought that meaning all came from adventure. After all, I love adventure. I was really good at it. State Department kept sending me to dangerous places because I was so good at dealing with them. And now all of a sudden I realized how utterly shallow that was. And I realized also that I had like nailed a heavy piece of plywood over my heart. I had a heart. And when I came back from Vietnam, I went to California, where I attended what they then called encounter groups, where you sat around with a bunch of other people and sort of spilled your guts and tried to find more shape to your life, some answers. And this group was really helpful to me because a lot of the other men in the group, they saw what I was beginning to see, that I had put this board over my heart. I couldn't feel anything there. All I could feel about was what were my own needs for, and my own needs were for adventure. And now I realized that was not a path to meaning at all. So I had no meaning, and I had to climb out of a very self-centered hole. At the same time, deal with PTSD. Heck, I had to walk on the shallow sides of the street in Palo Alto to avoid sniper fire.
So, anyway. John, so the next question is going to be, because of the risk that you took, the life that you led. Um, do you believe that risk is necessary to find the true meaning of life?
Yes, I do. And in my in my short video form on TikTok and Instagram, I say that repeatedly, that taking risk is an important part of life. And if you don't take risks, your life ultimately will be boring and even inconsequential. So yes, yes, but
Now,
it's the
yeah,
kind of
but
risk you take. It's what you take
there
the
you
risk
go.
for.
There
Now,
you go.
if I take a risk just to kill Viet Cong or to deal with KGB agents trying to kill me, that's one thing. But that's not what it's about. And what I began to realize was that risk taking was important, all right, but they had to be the right risk, and you had to be smart in taking them. And I finally learned that when the State Department sent me up to New York to work on at the United Nations, and they put me in charge of American policies toward Africa and for most of the third world. So I was dealing head on with issues like trying to end apartheid in South Africa, a system of institutionalized racism that was so abhorrent. And there were lots of other peace and justice issues. And I began to see that I had to take a lot of risks to solve those problems. Why? Because governments were slow, they were venal, they weren't doing the right thing. They were subject to all kinds of pressure, often because of people making money or not making money. Arms dealers, for example. So I went up against a lot of difficult opponents. Some of them really wanted to take me out. So it was really risky, but it was the right risk. I was taking risks for peace and justice issues. And I got to say, Calvin, one thing I'm really proud of in my life was at the United Nations, I was pretty influential in policies that helped end apartheid, and I feel really good about that. I managed to get the UN to agree to cut off all supplies of guns and military equipment to the South African police and military so that they couldn't use them to kill blacks anymore. And that ultimately it resulted in the end of apartheid. So that there are other things as well. But anyway, that's what my life had become. I'd done a 180 from that awful battle in Vietnam to helping end apartheid at the United Nations almost 10 years later. I mean, it's like I had done that 180, and now I was a passionate proponent for making the world a better place. But it came through. I just want to make sure your viewers realize that I wasn't born a good guy by any means. I was on the opposite side of things for half my life. Then it just got too much. I just realized how shallow it was, and that the real meaning in life. I'm finally going to answer a question you asked me like half an hour ago. The real meaning of my life didn't come from adventure, didn't come from physical risk. The real adventure of my life came from service, from wading into tough, difficult problems with lots of enemies and people wanting to go in the other direction, and helping solve those kinds of problems. In other words, service. The real meaning in life comes from some kind of service. And I thought at first I can say that for myself, but now working with the Giraffe Heroes Project for 40 years, I see that it's true for everybody, really, I think. I'd love to know your comments on this, but I think the biggest, most stable source of meaning in anybody's life is some kind of service, some kind of giving back, solving tough problems, making a positive difference, knowing that when you look at the reflection in the mirror in the morning, what looks back at you means something, that you're on the planet for a purpose, not just to screw around. You're here to make things better. Anyway.
I would agree with that, John, and I'm glad that you mentioned it depends on the type of risk that you take, because I'm sure there's a lot of your giraffe heroes that are just ordinary people who may have taken what seems to be a small risk in our eyes. It may have been a big thing to them or to somebody else, and because of that, they were able to do extraordinary things. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things, right?
Right, absolutely right. You used exactly the right words. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. We're going to put a little pin in this, and when we come back, we're going to finish up our conversation with John Graham. This is Born to Speak to You TV. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and we'll be right back in 60 seconds. And we are back. This is Born to Speak to You TV, and I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. We've had a stimulating conversation with John Graham today. And John, in this last segment, I want to ask you, for someone watching right now who wants to make a difference but doesn't know where to start, what's one small step, briefly, that they can take?
I think, if I may, two small steps. First of all, determine what really bugs you. What's the important problem? The one that doesn't get solved, no one else is solving it. It's really either annoying or it's dangerous or it's frustrating. God knows, in this country, Calvin, we got all kinds of those problems. So you pick one. The second point, and it's related to the first, is that take an assessment of your own skills and resources, because that will help point you as to where to start. If, for example, you have say you're a lawyer with a legal background, well, then maybe you should look for something in public interest law, or maybe not, or you love the outdoors, well, maybe there's an environmental challenge that will really turn you on, or maybe you're really good at music, well, then maybe starting a band and making people's lives pleasurable through music, that may be it. Or maybe you're great at math, so there's something to do with looking at the dangers posed by AI and stuff like that. Well, maybe that's where you should go. So it's like, there's a reason why an eagle has claws, right? And they're for a reason. It's the same reason why I'm good at math, you're good at music, whatever. Those help point us. But the key thing is to find out what you're passionate about, and to stop fibbing to yourself. Sit down with a trusted friend. Well, one of the things I suggest is to have a trusted friend ask you what you really would like to do with your life, and after you get to 5 issues that might be possible, then force yourself to add 5 more, then 10 more, till you come up with 50. Then have that friend read that list of 50 things that might just turn you on, that are passionate about, and look for your body language, because when he hits 2 or 3 of them that really are important to you, your head will shift, your eyes will brighten. It works all the time. I used it in workshop for decades. But in any case, you got to be honest with yourself as to what's really important. And it may be something where, yeah, you may lose money doing it, or there may be risks you hadn't really thought about. And you have to ask yourself if you're ready to take them.
You know, I'm glad you said that, John, because I always tell people in my circle that say they don't know what to do, they want to do something, they don't know what to do next in their life. I always tell them to take stock of where you're at. Talk to someone that knows you well. It could be, I would say, don't talk to family, close friends, maybe even somebody in the clergy that knows you, or if there's a particular field that you're interested in, find an expert in it and let them tell you, what's the ins and outs of that area, and then make a decision. So I definitely agree with you on that, John. Before we close, can you let our audience know how they can connect with you, learn more about your work, and stay inspired by the Giraffe Heroes Project?
First thing on the Giraffe Project, the URL is simple. It's the giraffe.org. The 2,000 stories are on there, plus notes and everything else we do. My own website is my name, johngraham.org. I've written a book called Quest, Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning, which I think is a pretty good guide. I've written other books as well on social action. And finally, please, this is real simple. Tune into Badass Granddad on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube. It's just short 3-minute videos. And I think over a year, I've gotten pretty damn good at it. I'm really having fun doing it. I mean, I've got over 500,000 viewers so far, and like 50,000 followers, and it's really booming. People are really liking it. I aimed it for young people, but middle-aged and older people are watching it too. I tell, like I say, there are stories of my adventures, but each with a life lesson attached to it, so I can get that in as well. That's probably enough about me, but
All right.
yeah.
All right. So that's johngraham.com.
No, org. O-R-G.
johngraham.org, giraffe.org, and your book is currently on Amazon as Quest, Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning.
It's also an audio book, so you can,
An audio book. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, John, for being our guest today. And we are going to take a little short break. We'll be right back to close up. This is Born to Speak to You TV. I'm Calvin Gibbs. We'll be right back. And we are back. This is Born to Speak to You TV. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and we've had a fantastic conversation with John Graham on the topic of just being a better person, a conversation about how to take risk, how to live life and make change through service. I often mention that we live in a world currently that wants us to be silent, that wants us to just go along with whatever is going on. And as John said, and I do agree with him on this part, we need to face fear head on. A lot of us are scared to speak. And I also, in one part of my life, was scared to speak, but it's through my work as in the theater, as an actor, writer, director, producer of theater, and my work in Toastmasters and being a podcaster, that I started to understand the power of words and using my voice and building my platform to make change. So I suggest that each one of you, this is your invitation. Find out what matters to you. Okay, find out what the meaning of life is for you, and then take the right steps to build that platform, to make that change happen. You will grow yourself, you'll see the people around you grow, and you will see a change in the world. You'll see your community grow and beyond. So get ready, because again, this show was not just a conversation. It's an invitation for you, the viewers, to rethink what courage means in your life and how you can use it to make a difference. We often talk about, I'm scared. I don't know what to do, right? Well, we just gave you some great tips. You don't have to know it yourself. Go talk to somebody. Find someone that knows you well. It could be a friend. You could go to family, although I personally suggest not doing family. A clergy member. It could be a teacher, or it could be somebody that's just an expert in a field that sounds interesting to you. Do your research. We have the internet at our fingertips. Do your research, ask your questions. And then when you find that uh, purpose of your life, that meaningful thing that you can do in life, as John said, you're going to know it. Your eyes are going to light up. Your head is going to have so many ideas. You won't be able to write them all down or get them all out. That's when you found the meaning of your life, your purpose. They say that it's 2 days in your life that's the most important: the day you were born and the day you find out why. I agree with that as well. The day that I was born in April was a great day. I celebrated every day still, every year still, I should say. But the day that I found out why I was interested in words, why I went to so much theater on and off Broadway, I would sit there and just be enthralled by the lights, by the sounds, by the singing, by the colors. There's a reason why all that happened. There's a reason why I packed up everything I owned and moved to the Midwest from the East Coast, not knowing anybody in the Midwest. Found a job and still continue to just move on, following what I felt my calling was going to be. Got more involved with theater this time, being on stage myself, learning how to handle myself with an audience, a live audience, just me and them, and giving them the experience of the power of my word, finding ways to move them with emotion, making them laugh, making them cry, making them wonder why. And then becoming a Toastmaster, giving literally hundreds and hundreds of speeches, getting countless evaluations, writing, rewriting, until I reached the stage of becoming a distinguished Toastmaster. And to me, that was like the switch came on. Calvin, you can talk, you can make a change, find out where your area of expertise is going to be in, and go help people. Do something. Use your voice, use your power. And here we are today with Born to Speak to You TV, and we're trying to empower you to do the same thing. Your journey is going to be different than my journey. My journey is different than, let's say, John's journey. But it all starts with one thing: making a move, finding out what you need to do, and then going through the steps of doing it. Trust me, there is nothing more fulfilling in life than doing something that matters, that finding something that you can speak life into and making it matter. There's nothing more exciting and more meaningful than that. So on that note, this has been Born to Speak to You TV. You can find us on DFN Broadcast Studios website. You can also find us on LinkedIn. We have a Facebook page as well. And we are also going to be carried on Roku, Apple TV. Look for Born to Speak to You TV. There's ways that you can connect with us there. Subscribe to the page. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, what I can do better, what topics you may want to see. If you're interested to be a guest yourself, let me know. Okay, you can also reach me through my website, which is calvingibbs.com. Just go down to the bottom of the page, contact, let me know that you like the show, if you want to be on the show, if something different you want to see on the show, and I'll be sure to have someone get back to you, if not myself, as soon as possible. Well, that's about all, y'all, for this episode of Born to Speak to You TV. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. It's been a pleasure. I also want to thank DFN Broadcast Studios for this opportunity to bring this show to you. And I especially want to thank my guest, John Graham, for that stimulating conversation that we had today. And until the next episode of Born to Speak to You TV, keep speaking life into the moments that matter.
Of Brooklyn, where stories grow wild, to the glow of the stage where the dream meets the child. A quiet flame, a hidden spark, drawn to the words that lit up the dark. Curtains rose and so did he, finding power in poetry. One voice, one mic, one sacred truth. Every word he spoke uncaged the youth. He saw the world try to silence the bold, but his soul was wired to break the mold. Now he walks in purpose, pure and true. He was born to speak to you. He's got that rhythm in his truth, that fire in his flow. Speaking life into the moment, watch it grow. Every phrase, every beat, a breakthrough cue. Yeah, he was born to speak to you. Let